My friend, the Right Honourable David Mellor. David, good morning to you. The accusation is made today, David, that Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, rejected legal advice, presumably from Home Office lawyers. You are a King's Counsel. Tell me your opinion. Is a minister, is any client for that matter, bound to act on legal advice?
Absolutely not. And lawyers advise, politicians decide. But I do think that if you choose to reject legal advice, there has to be a good reason for it. But what the Home Office was always doing in my day was warning me about the dangers of judicial review and all the awful things that would happen if we went down a particular course. But I think the job of the politician is to decide. There are times when you simply have to do that in order to do the right thing by the British people. And certainly, so far as Suella Braverman is concerned, I think where she has been foolish is in failing to control the flow of information from her, which makes her look sloppy. I spent 5 years as a Home Office minister. All the time there would be 5 or 6 ministers in the Home Office. None of us were ever hauled up for having misused information. And what that does is undermine what otherwise is a perfectly good ideas that she has, which is we have to control migrants, particularly migrants coming across the channel in small boats, something that her previous predecessor, Priti Patel, couldn't do. I mean, to me, the shocking statistic, Michael, is that in 2020, 50 Albanians made the crossing, and this year it's 10 to 12,000. They're Albanian men, young men. They're not coming to Britain because they have to. They're not coming to Britain because they're going to make some great contribution to the future of our country. They're coming to Britain in the main because they are criminals, and Albanians are notorious for setting up drug gangs and so on. It's not wrong for Suella Braverman to want to do something about that.
David, I think you make good points, and I'll take your point about how sloppy Suella Braverman has been with information. But I wonder whether you suspect that the Home Office is once again trying to push out a Home Secretary, which I think is a pattern we've seen before. In other words, they give legal advice. If the minister decides not to take the legal advice, they then leak the fact that the minister has not taken legal advice, which to the layman sounds a bit like some sort of crime has been committed. You and I know that ministers decide, and they can decide not to take legal advice.
Yes, there may be some of that. You see, when I spent my 5 years at the Home Office, we had big, strong Home Secretaries like Willie Whitelaw. But also, the Home Office was a very, very high morale department. There was no Department of Justice at that time. And so there was no real breakdown in the relationship between Home Office ministers and Home Office civil servants. And I spent a lot of time keeping in touch with some of my civil servants, and some of the most fascinating times I've ever spent in my life were actually discussing policy issues with them. But I fear things have gone downhill, not because I've got nothing to do it anymore, but you feel that the relationship between ministers and civil servants has deteriorated to such a point that something I never believed in my 11 years as a minister, civil servants were out to get you, Paranoids, even paranoids have enemies, and I think Suella Braverman has probably got a few enemies.